Thank you for that presentation, Lalu, and also thinking with all of us in solidarity with Turkey, with all that's happening. I'm from UCSC, a land which we gather back home is unceded territory of the Avasvas-speaking UP tribe, and here I'm standing acknowledging the Gabrielino Thongwa peoples as the traditional land caretakers of Thuangar. I pay my respects also to Hunuk Vietnam, the ancestors, Ahir Hirum, the elders, and Yu Hingim, our relatives and relations, past, present, and emerging, the land that we stand on today at UCLA. Yeah, at odds with even love, Utopia in performance. This essay explores performance and performance making as a practice to build new narratives and invent worlds that foster spaces for queer people. It attempts to speak of the social purposiveness of the padam, the amorous love poem song genre, through a queering of multiple forms. This research emerges from my recent musical performances titled At Odds with Even Love, juxtaposing queer lived experiences from 20th century India with 17th century padams. This paper discusses the queer possibilities in that. This emerges from my lifelong training in South Indian classical music, which is called Carnatic music, and Pan-Indian devotional mystical music traditions. The primary anthology from which I borrow my stories is titled Less Than Gay, published in 1991, which is the first document in India asking for queer rights, civil rights for queer people. Using a practice-led methodology, archives of love, queering narratives, and autoethnography of my performance work, I discuss the intersections and affordances of music, poem, story, and song, centering the experience of the marginalized. In the next iteration of this project, I wish to reimagine Utopia through the works of Jose Esteban Munoz, Jill Dolan, and Angela Davis, which I will gesture towards at the end of this presentation. So, what's the performance like? In this performance piece, I read out a letter from the anthology that I mentioned before and sing a song from the Padam tradition that has a similar narrative. I was invited to premiere At Odds with Even Love at Kamakshi Mehfil in Chennai to celebrate the first anniversary of decriminalizing homosexuality in India on September 6th, 2019. Following is an example of one such pairing. The first is an excerpt from one of the stories from Less Than Gay, and the second is a Telugu Padam attributed to the 17th century poet-composer Kshetriya from South India. We developed mutual love. She was very possessive of me. Would our relationship get social and legal sanction? We had developed physical intimacy in the form of kissing, petting, hugging, breast-sucking, fingering, and cunnilingus. One day, on my return from work, I found her in a compromising posture with a young girl in her room. From then on, our relationship soured. I felt cheated. I even attempted suicide. The pain and agony of it will always linger on in my memory. The most traumatic thing is that the world is neither aware of our marriage nor of the end. I had to face the pain more or less all by myself. 1991. Anonymous. I invite you to probably close your eyes, listen to the story, remember the story that I've said, and listen to this music with that in mind. It's a very quick excerpt of the piece. I hear you, alas, my beloved is now sick of me. Bitterness prevails all over. The Lord who always slept with his head on my breast, on my bosom, is now sick of me. When his eyes fixed unblinking on my face, he would say, when dusk falls, my beloved, your face, alas, will be hidden in the dark. And then asked me, my beloved asked me in broad daylight for a lamp. That beloved of mine, alas, Aiyo is now sick of me. What do I do in this is I juxtapose non-traditional queer stories with seemingly traditional narratives, pursuing heteronormative dynamics like this one, like Radha Krishna, divine lovers, divine god, goddess scenarios. I then work to undo this opposition, showing how the two narratives are similar, queering tradition, by demonstrating how the lover-beloved dynamic can incorporate multiple identities, can incorporate multiple positionalities. What do you want? Oh, okay. I employ querying as a form of questioning dominant power knowledge formations that work to construct normative ideas of gender, music, performance, sexuality, and relationships. Queer people in India often face abuse and systemic opposition for non-normative behavior across gender, identity, caste, class, and sexuality. This form of oppression is not uncommon in countries in South Asia with a history of colonialism. Such systemic oppression is part of the lived experience of marginalized communities across the world, like immigrant populations, minoritized racial groups, people of color in the US, queer people of color in the diaspora. It is generative to think of the shared solidarity across all of these populations, across the complex intersections of multiple layers of marginalization. Here I take the help of performance studies scholar Chambers and Son. He argues how for queer people of color, everyday life itself can be an experience in constant negation, and performance then becomes a way of creating places, not only for our minoritized singular selves, but also for the experience of being together and being indifference. I'm going to a very brief history of the queer rights fight in India. Justice Indu Malhotra says history was an apology to members of the community for the delay in ensuring rights in the Section 377 ruling that came in September 6, 2018, decriminalizing homosexuality. It was illegal to have gay sex in India until 5 years ago. The history of the modern queer rights movement in India roughly started 3 decades ago with activism against the draconian Section 377. It is the doing rather than the being that constituted the legal intervention. It says, whoever voluntarily has carnal intercourse against the order of nature with any man, woman, or animal shall be punished with imprisonment for life, or with imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 10 years. Thomas Macaulay authored this section in 1860 as part of Britain's efforts to impose Victorian values on its largest colony, India. You can see that man there, the second one, after Henry. That's the person. Alright, the law has its roots in the 16th century Bagri Act, Henry VIII, the first person, time, and it was the first law in England that brought the offense of sodomy from the courts of the church to the state, also punishable by death. After a legal battle of over 3 decades since the fight to remove this section started, in 2016, Navteet Singh Johar and 4 others filed a petition challenging Section 377 of the Supreme Court. It was the first time queer individuals, and not organizations, were asking for their rights from the state. A colonial legislature made Section 377 criminal. It's an anachronistic colonial law. It has confined a group of citizens to the margins. It rests on deep-rooted gender stereotypes, is what Justice Chandrachud said on the momentous verdict 5 years ago. In the unanimous verdict, the 5-judge constitutional bench of Supreme Court termed the section irrational, indefensible, and manifestly arbitrary, bidding adieu to the 157-year-old regressive colonial remnant, decriminalizing homosexuality. While there's still problems with it, which I will not go into that for now, I'll move on to how I look at mixing these different ideas, queer traditions. I'll quickly read you a definition of Sedgwick that I use as queer is a continuing movement, a continuing movement, motive recurrent, eddying, turbulent. The word queer itself means a cross. It comes from the Indo-European root twerk, which also yields the German queer, transverse, Latin torquere, to twist, and English athwart. Foregrounding the social, musical, lyrical, and cultural context of both the Bhakti poem songs and the Padam will help draw parallels between the past and the both queer present. I focus, for an example, a poem from the 11th century, which you all might have read by now. Look here, dear fellow, I wear these men's clothes only for you. Sometimes I'm man, sometimes I'm woman. O Lord of the meeting rivers, I'll make wars for you, but I'll be your devotees' bride. So what am I doing? The Bhakti tradition, which is this mystic spiritual tradition, pan-Indian tradition, has its roots in early Tamil saints, takes on a new form in Telugu poem songs that I just sang at the beginning, and uses erotic imagination to express a religious vision. These are devotional works of an erotic caste, comprised of male poets using a feminine voice and performed by women. The god here assumes the role of a lover, seen for the most part through the eyes of his courtesans, mistresses, or wives, whose persona the poet adopts. Padams are explicit in topics of sexuality and hence are considered risky in orthodox settings. There have been attempts to weed out the compositions from practice to uphold 20th century Indian nationalistic discourse of a spiritual national identity excised of its eroticism. I draw on the scholarship, but from a queering perspective in performance. Carnatic musicians even today, critics and teachers, have reinforced the idea of the female voice is alone suitable to sing the padam, and that men are suitable for far more intellectual music with complex melodic and rhythmic structures, which I also oppose through the performing of it, as men are not allowed. As recently as the 20th century, 20th century courtesans, 20th century musicians have said, how incongruous is it for a mustached, whiskered man to sing the song of a courtesan which says, my husband is calling me. And then someone I know, I learned from, said, do anything but keep Carnatic music out of this queer thing of yours. So these statements were some of my initial provocations for this performance. This has been performed at about 13, 14 venues across 2 continents, 3 countries, 9 cities. This project is ongoing and further invites audiences to contribute personal queer stories, preferably in the form of a letter. It's a growing transnational archive of letters, desires, queer love, songs. I have personal narratives in Tamil, Hindi, Malayalam, Korean, French, and Spanish. I look forward to including stories with queer personal stories from South Asian diaspora as well as from the Indian subcontinent. I'll speak a little more later in the Q&A if someone has more doubts in where this project is going in the future. Yes, thank you.